Hi guys, and thank you for joining us again today. Today we're going to be talking to somebody who is not a massage therapist, but Caddie Marshall is a mental health first aid trainer. Now I'm sure many of you have had instances where you've had a client on the table and they start to open up and tell you things that they feel safe to talk about. And how do you as a massage therapist know how to deal with that? How do you respond to it? What's the best approach when this happens to you? So sit back and enjoy this interview with Caddie Marshall. Okay, good morning, Caddie Marshall. Thank you very much for giving me some time to have a chat to you about what you do and your life story. Maybe not all of it, maybe some of it.
I know.
So we go from here. Now, doing a little bit of research on you, you are a lady of many skills.
That's my dog. Sorry.
Right? You're a lady.
That was my little dog.
You're a lady of many skills. First and foremost, you're a nurse, a registered nurse.
Yes.
And that was that your original training way back in the day?
Yes, in 1976 at Bankstown Hospital, general nursing, and then I did psych nursing and midwifery as well.
Some very interesting variations on the theme there.
Yes, well, I was interested in just trying a few different things, but mental health nursing's been the one that I've kind of stuck with most over a long period now, on and off.
Yeah. But you also have a master's degree in business administration.
Yes, that's right.
And you work in occupational health and safety.
I've got postgraduate studies in that, and I include that into some of my presentations. So I sort of couch things under the workplace health safety framework, if you like, for the mental health first aid stuff that I do, yeah.
Okay. And then over the years, you've worked at Queensland University, you've worked with Newcastle University, you've worked with, is it the Notre Dame University in Broome? Yep.
Yep.
So lots of roles in very varied and interesting areas there. Have they all been around the mental health subject?
No, initially when I started with the universities, when I started with Newcastle University, it was predominantly when the nursing went into universities as a tertiary study. And then after that, I did some OH&S, I did postgraduate OH&S, and then I did my MBA, and then I got into teaching business studies. So I was mainly teaching business and nursing. So essentially it's been a combination of business and nursing over the years, and probably more recently business at Federation University into the master's degree in health services management in Brisbane, and nursing at Central Queensland University. So that's the most recent ones. Yeah, so just that combination of nursing and business, which I like, because with the mental health first aid, you can bring that into a workplace context.
A very dear friend of mine of probably nearly 50 years now, 40 or 50 years, had a very similar trajectory to yourself, where she started out as a psych nurse and went on to do her MBA, and then at one point she was chief nurse of Victoria for a number of years.
Wow.
Yeah, so I have a bit of an insight into what that whole gamut of nursing, for want of a better grouping, entails. But I'm much more interested in your mental health first aid training. So can you explain to us, what is mental health first aid?
Yes, certainly. It's an unusual sort of term for those people who haven't heard of it. So what I say to people is, CPR, when you do this, the purpose of that is preservation of life. until the professionals come or until the crisis resolves. And it's the same sort of thing for mental health first aid. So it's actually preserving life. And the way in which we do this is we start to be able to recognise signs and symptoms in people when they're becoming unwell, if they have an exacerbation or a worsening of their mental health disorder, or if they're in a crisis. So it's helping people to get through that and then to know who to refer them to. So to understand who is the most appropriate professional for this person, given that they're displaying a cluster of signs and symptoms. I try not to label things like you've got anxiety or depression. We say people are displaying certain sorts of behaviours or their functioning is affected in a particular way, which could be similar to anxiety or whatever, and then saying, okay, who's the most appropriate professional for me to refer this person to? And also, what sort of self-help strategies can I recommend for them? So that's really what mental health first aid is. It's very similar to first aid, but I often say to people, how often do you use this a day? How often do you use this a day? You know, and nowadays we're using it more and more. And because it's been a little bit of a mysterious sort of area, mental illness and mental health, a lot of people are quite reluctant to talk about it. So with this program, it's fabulous because it talks about the common mental illnesses and it also looks at self-care. So what the positive sort of results are with the program is that the attendees have better help-seeking behaviour too and learn skills and strategies in order to help themselves, their family, friends, colleagues, but themselves, which is great.
I was talking to a colleague last night and she was saying that her current employer, every time she got an email from her at the moment, because she's decided to, my colleague has decided that, you know, it's not appropriate for her to work at the moment. And every time she gets an email from her employer, she said, my anxiety levels go up. And I said to her, that sounds like it's time to leave, because if that's happening just from seeing her emails come through, there's a lot of other stuff going on there. I was involved in a Zoom meeting about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and it was a group of massage therapists, and the topic of discussion was tales from the table, and it was nothing but hilarious tales. And just listening to you then, I can go back to probably half a dozen quite serious incidents, I guess, or conversations that has occurred with myself, and I don't doubt there's a lot of other therapists out there who've had similar experiences. Excuse me. So how would a massage therapist, soft tissue therapist, know who to refer somebody on to? I know personally I've referred a client to a psychiatrist, and I know he was a psychologist, sorry.
So your question was, how would a therapist know who to refer the person to? So I guess that, I mean, therein lies the purpose of the program, because the program actually teaches you how to recognise signs and symptoms, and you know, your response to your friend or your client is often, you know, fraught with regret, and people sort of say, why didn't I recognise this? Why didn't I know these sorts of things? I should have. You know, there's a should have, could have that comes into people's heads around, why didn't I see that? You know, now when you learn about things, you might say, oh, okay, I could have seen that thing, but I say you can't could have, should have, because you didn't. And it's a big thing in life, because often we're filled with regret and you know, blame. A lot of what we do is we blame ourselves too, and people who have had experiences with people who suicide, they're often blaming themselves. So this is part of the program, is to say, well, how do we actually recognise these signs and symptoms? And sometimes you can't. Sometimes there are no signs, no symptoms, no indication for people who want to take their own life. And I guess, you know, for most of us, it's counterintuitive to want to take your own life. But it depends on people's beliefs. You know, some people believe in different things. But going back to your question about how do therapists recognise these things. So what we actually look for, we look for, and we actually heighten our observation. So we actually see things that we might not have recognised before. So I use a lot of mindfulness in my programs in order to get people to focus and pay attention and full attention to what they're doing in the moment. So when we say to somebody, we might say, "Oh, g'day, Laurie, how you going? You know, you all right?" Australians are the only ones that actually I know answer their own question. It's like, "You're all right? Yeah. How you going, Laurie? You're all right? Yep." And then off you go. And you think, I haven't even had time to say, and even if I did tell them, nobody wants to know anyway, you know. But so the course actually teaches you, well, things like you said, psychiatrist, psychologist. Most people don't know the difference. Why would I refer someone to a psychologist as opposed to a psychiatrist, or a social worker, or a mental health nurse, or an online facility like, say, Suicide Prevention Line, or Beyond Blue, or Headspace, or, you know, what is the differences? What is the difference? And why might I refer this particular person to those areas? So really it's about knowledge base, so knowledge building about what are referral sources, what are available in your particular area. For that person, if somebody has mild symptoms or expresses mild symptoms to you, it could be a referral to a psychologist. However, if somebody has got a complex mental illness, or somebody who is in a crisis situation, it could be to the psychiatrist or straight to the emergency department, with either the ambulance or the police or yourself, or, you know, those sorts of situations. So we look at a variety of situations and we say, okay, how do we assess? And you know the ABC, well, it used to be ABC. I'm a simple person. I like airway, breathing, circulation. Now it's DRABCD. Yeah, is there any more words that go after it now?
I have to redo mine in September, I think. I have to renew it, so I'll let you know when I find out.
Oh God! So anyway, you know, with the mental health first aid, we use the acronym ALGE, ALGEE, and the A stands for assess and assist. So how do we assess someone, and then how we approach them? So assess, approach, and assist. So thinking about how do you approach someone, and thinking about yourself, is it good for me to approach this person today? Maybe it's not a good day for me. How am I feeling in myself? And perhaps it might be more appropriate for somebody else. How do I assess this person? So effectively, the mental health first aid is like a risk assessment. It's looking at urgency, intent, what sorts of behaviours is this person displaying. So it's really like a little mini risk assessment. And how you assess them is the sort of questions you might ask. So, and then how you assist. And if you have to assist in a crisis, we look at the crisis situations such as panic attack, suicidal ideation or thoughts, and behaviours. So if somebody is self-harming, or if somebody is talking about suiciding, taking their own life. And then the second one is L, which is listen non-judgmentally. So we learn how to actually listen without judgment, which is very difficult, I must add. You know, and actually let's have a look at our own judgments and our own filters and biases, because we have them whether you like it or not. So how do we listen and observe non-judgmentally without assumptions? So that's the A and the L, and then there's the G, giving information, and giving accurate information is important. So when you might say to your friend, I think it's time, you know, for you perhaps to review your employment, let's say, if they're finding it very stressful, but it could be something else that's creating that anxiety under them, and maybe somebody in the employment situation is just like that camel that breaks the straw back, you know, the straw that breaks the camel's back, I should say. So that's the giving information and support. Now there's a whole range of supports, informational support, education, there's just practical support, like taking people meals if they've got postnatal depression. You know, so how can you support someone who's got postnatal depression, of which 15% of women actually have, which is interesting. It's quite a large number. And, you know, things like take the dog for a walk, take the baby for an hour, 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, 2 years. I don't know, bring it back when it's 16. Only joking. But, what can I do? Make a bit extra on my meals, put them in a container and take them over to my friend. You know, do the washing, lots of just practical things for people. So looking at what sorts of support can we have in there, and it might be ringing them once a week. It could be, you know, support from EAP, which is, we're very, very privileged in this country to have employee assistance programs. Not everybody has those, but and most people have them, but a lot of people aren't actually aware of what they do. Yeah. So having a better understanding about what the EAP program actually provides. And if you're not happy with that, looking at other supports that you can get, like going to your GP for the mental health care plan that can give you access to psychological support for little or no cost, rather than paying maybe $180 an hour. If you have a mental health care plan through your GP, you can actually access those supports, which can be, say, 6 to 10 sessions with a psychologist. So the last one is E and E, so ALGEE. E is encourage supports, a family and friend. So looking at perhaps families and friends that are appropriate for people to give support, and actually being able to talk about it. One of the biggest things is conversation, I find. Being able to have a conversation. How do I start? What do I say? Maybe if I say something, it'll make them worse. Should I talk about asking them, are they thinking about taking their own life? Or is that going to make them do it? Well, no, it's actually the opposite. People are relieved. So that it sort of clarifies a lot of mystique, the myths, and brings the facts about things, which is good, and looks at, you know, describes the signs and symptoms of these common mental health disorders, like anxiety, depression, substance use, and psychosis, and how the treatments, the conventional treatments, and alternative treatments, and then it looks at how you can provide those supports. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Does that explain it a little bit better?
And I guess with the times that we are living through at the moment, given what's happened in lots of parts of the various states before Christmas, the summer bushfires, you know, the far north coast, Queensland, south coast, Victoria, Kangaroo Island. People are, I guess, in those areas are starting to, or were starting to, work through the rehab, for want of a better term, of the rebuilding, and how do they go about that when, you know, the coronavirus has now hit. So I would assume that there would be lots of therapists in our industry who are in those areas that are hearing all sorts of stories from their clients, and that would just be, for some people, I guess, with the coronavirus, and if they've got mental health issues that they are probably not aware of. A client said to me just before we had to shut down, so it was about 5 or 6 weeks ago, who has worked through anxiety and depression for the last 10 years. And she's coming out of it now, and she's, you know, the medication has been sorted out a while ago, and she's doing awesome. And her husband, she was telling me her husband said to her that, you know, he's not sleeping, he's waking up in the middle of the night, you know, he's worried about what's going to happen if, you know, he has to shut the business down, blah, blah, blah. And she said, she just looked at him and she said, welcome to my world, you know. I was made for this time, and I'm in a good place for it. But he had to be reminded that that's where his wife has been for the last 10 years. and it was an interesting comment that she made. So with the mental first, we'll try that again, with the mental first aid training programs that you run, I did see the other day that you are now doing an online program, is that right?
Yes, that's right. I just want to write down a couple of those things that you said, because I would like to pick up on that. You were talking about recovery or rehabilitation, and you also talked about the combination of stressors. I'll just pick up on that combination of stressors. And then there was the other thing that you said that was really resonates with a lot of people, is that your friend didn't know that he didn't know he was unwell, or she didn't know they were unwell. And a lot of people will say to you who are unwell, my unwell brain can't tell my well brain that I'm not okay. Okay. My unwell brain can't tell my well brain that I'm not okay. And that is very, very true, because more often than not, other people see those subtle changes in you before you do. Because when we're unwell, we can't recognise those things. And sometimes we actually lack insight. And that's part of the illness as well. Just like stress, you know, what I do in my programs is I look at a lot around stress and how stress actually physiologically affects us, but how it affects us psychologically in terms of our memory, our judgment, our insight, you know, the fight and flight response, and how that actually affects our body and our brain, and how we think and how we respond. So just a quick one on the recovery. You talked about rehabilitation. So you've got the fires, the floods, and before that we had the floods only probably, I don't know, maybe was it 6 to 9 months before that we had devastating floods in Queensland. I remember travelling over to Broome and seeing thousands, like literally hundreds of thousands of cattle dead all the way from Queensland over to Broome. So people have gone through these sorts of things, and what happens, or what is happening, is people are having combinations. So you've got all these layers, and a really important part of recovery is to have time in between those two things. So when you get slammed with one and then another and then another, our resilience is compromised, and we aren't able to manage that. Whereas, say, on other occasions we would be able to, if we didn't have that combination of stressors. Yeah. Sorry. So going back to the online one, yes. So as a response to the COVID-19, the Mental Health First Aid Australia has developed, or is almost finished developing, and it's going to launch in mid-May. It's 100% online, which includes webinar plus about say 6 to 8 hours of online learning, so your e-learning package. And then after that component's complete, you can then do 2 times 2.5 hour webinars with me. If you come through me. So that's how it works. So it will be access to the e-learning platform, plus you get a comprehensive 184 pages of the manual, a mental health manual, so you can have a physical copy as well as your online copy, which is a great resource, really good. And that covers things like eating disorders, gambling, as well as all the other ones that I was talking to you about. And you get your e-learning platform, the manual, all sorts of other resources online, and then you do the 2.5 hour webinars. And then when you finish that, you have the opportunity at no extra cost to become an accredited mental health first aider by doing an online assessment, which takes about 20 minutes. Which you should be able to do no problem if you've been listening in the classes and if you've done your work properly, not got someone else to do it for you. And what that actually means, Laurie, is that you can, in the workplace, it's great. It's a great marketing tool for you as well, because you can say, hey, I'm a soft tissue therapist. I've got my mental health first aid accreditation. So if I can compare it or liken, Mental Health First Aid Australia is the auspicing body or the governing body that writes the standards for people like myself who deliver the program. The Australian Resuscitation Council is the auspicing body or the lead body that has the standards that, say, St John's Ambulance and that follow for their first aid. So it's a very similar thing. So Australia, Mental Health First Australia, First Aid Australia has all the guidelines for mental health. So you can access that as well anytime now. You could go onto their website and look at all their guidelines. But I would recommend, you could also do face-to-face courses, which go for 12 hours, and you get 12 CPD points. So this is important for the therapists. You get 12 CPD points if you do the program.
Okay.
So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
No, it sounds. I'm getting an echo back there.
And you'll be able to pass the exam no problem if you come to my classes, see? Because I give you a few extra little resources, so that we have fun too. It can be a really heavy subject, so it's important, I think, to find a facilitator that can, allow people to have a bit of fun as well when you're doing the program. I think that's important.
I think the term that I saw when I was researching you was your ability to provide edutainment. Is that the correct
That's
way?
it. That's right. I don't talk about the dancing, the getting up on the table and dancing at lunchtime for a bit of entertainment. But we do have a bit of fun. I like to have fun when I work and when I do my programs. It's fun and we have fun, but we also have the serious side of things too, and we can talk through those as well. But the program is actually an educational program, so it isn't a therapy session. So that's important for people to know, and it also means that for people who do mental health first aid and have an accreditation, because you've done the program, it doesn't make you any more liable, because this is a question some people ask. They say, oh, what if I've done it now? Does that mean I have to be more liable for my staff members or whatever? No, it doesn't, because under the Workplace Health Safety Act, we are all responsible for providing a safe place of work. But what it does do is it gives you more tools to work with. And it can be a really good, it's a life-changing thing for a lot of people. And in particular for their workplaces, they see lots of reduction in lost time injuries. People are more open in the conversations around mental illness and mental health and sharing, which develops relationships and trust. So there's a whole range of benefits that can come out of the program.
I find it really funny in the last probably six to 8 years of practice that there's a younger generation of people coming through who are quite open about their mental health, not telling everybody, this, that and the other. I'm just going back to when I first started 30 years ago, that no one mentioned, I suffer from depression. Whereas today, there's lots of people that I have seen over the last 6 to 8 years who, on the intake form, any injuries or predisposing conditions I need to be aware of, not only do they fill that out, but I also ask the question, because what they'll write and what they'll tell you are usually two different things. But they will often tell you that they're on antidepressants because of blah, blah, blah. This happened to me, or they'll tell you while you're working on them on the table. And I think that a lot of soft tissue therapists have experienced this and have probably not known how to react to it. And I had an experience many, many years ago when a client opened up to me that she was a victim of domestic violence. And I'd only been practicing for about 4 or 5 years. I was young and dumb, as they say. And I just sort of went into male shutdown mode. I don't need to hear this. I'm a man. We don't talk about emotions. We don't touch it. And I was having a conversation with a friend of mine at the time who was a counsellor. And she said, you kind of did the right thing. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, what did you do after you shut down? So I just let her talk. And she said, that's the right thing to do. The wrong thing was to shut down. You don't have to comment. You don't have to interject. You just have to be there as a listening post. And she obviously felt, the client I met, obviously felt comfortable enough to open up to you. And it's probably something that enhanced whatever treatment you were doing at the time, because she was able to get rid of some component of what was going on the emotional side, which, as we all know, does affect the physical, and the physical does affect the emotional. Even though in the medical profession, you know, the brain is separated from the rest of the body, because what happens here, we put over to psychiatrists and psychologists, and that has nothing to do with the pain going on in your lower back.
Yeah, just get the checkup from the neck up. Don't worry about anything else, which is crazy. It's changing, hopefully.
Well, we know from evidence-based research that a lot of what we do as soft tissue therapists, particularly when we're working around the spinal column, that we are having a direct effect on the parasympathetic nervous system. And as you said before, that flight or fight response, or rest and repose, also has a big effect on your treatment outcome. So if somebody comes in, I had a gentleman probably 8 or 9 months ago, came in, new client, and I said, what can I do for you? I don't know. I said, so why have you made the booking? Well, my wife made the booking. I said, so,
good on him for turning up.
Well, I tell you what, it was the longest. He said, just do what you normally do. So I thought, well, there is no normal, you know, like it's assess, treat, it's reassess, educate, and go and do some things. It was, one of the longest sessions I've ever had, because he didn't talk, he didn't say a word, he was just there to please his wife and get some brownie points up. But I'd like to think that it had some effect on his parasympathetic nervous system, that he might have walked out of here with a slightly different mindset about what hands-on treatment can do. Because I was talking to a gentleman in England the other night about this Anglo inhibition to touch, that it's just, and when I lecture, I often use the phrase appropriate touch.
Yeah.
Because it is appropriate touch as opposed to the other kind.
And exactly.
That there's so many people who are so misinformed, and this is one of the things that's been brought out by the COVID-19. There's the relaxation, the spa type massage therapy, which is great. There is the remedial myotherapy type, which is, find and fix and works alongside other allied health professionals. And then there's the sexual gratification, which, we get lumped into so many times, and it's so frustrating to hear. And I was talking to a colleague the other day, and she mentioned something that one of her students had said about happy endings, and she just tore him to strips, because it was A, it was inappropriate, and B, it was degrading of what we do. And as a male therapist, I don't get that. It doesn't happen to me. It happens to women. I have heard of other guys who have been hit on by women and by gay men, and how they've handled it. I've never had that happen to me, touch wood. But I've also had conversations with female colleagues who have had that happen to them, and how they coped with it, and that as well has got to have some sort of effect on their mental health, whether they're aware of it or not. How do they?
And the touch thing is interesting, because I think we're living in a risk-averse society, and the more we go on, the less people do want to touch, because they're fearful of litigation and all these sorts of things. and of course the media's in our faces all the time, you know, with all the bad news. I guess liken it to nursing. I mean, and I'm a really touchy person, you know. When I go to a patient, I would give them a bit of a hug, and I'd, you know, fluff their pillows up and touch them and make them comfortable, and just hold them and say, how are you, darling? And, you know, can I get you anything while I'm here? And all those sorts of comfort cares seem to be missing a lot nowadays, and I see that in student nurses, because I teach student nurses as well, nursing, and I think it's really important that we don't lose that, you know, that therapeutic touch, if you like, and like you say, the appropriate touch. And with our children, it's so important, because that actually gives us those sorts of changes, those you know, chemical changes in our body, doesn't it, to make us feel happy and make us feel loved and belonging and all those sorts of things. So it's so important to you know, get those right and not to be drawn into other stuff. But did you want to ask me a question about what happens that must affect people's mental health when they're approached? Is that what you were going to ask there at the end? I think you...
Yeah, I guess there would be some form of anxiety, for want of a better term. Like one colleague rang me and told me what had happened, and I said, well, all you need to do is just don't book them in again. Oh, but he keeps ringing me up, and you know, and I know her financial situation, and I said to her, you don't need the money that bad. You don't need to put up with that rubbish. You know, just say no, because it's affecting how you're thinking, and it's affecting how you're going to be working, because you're not going to be working effectively on that person, because you're going to be concerned about where they're coming from, as opposed to what you are trying to achieve. It doesn't matter what. For me, I said to her, it doesn't matter what his health condition is like. He's not there for the right reasons. Just cut him and be done with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think boundaries, setting very, very clear boundaries, just like you do with someone with substance use. I mean, this is a different situation, but the boundaries have to be very clear and right up front, and allowing people to know what the service is and what it's not. And these are the consequences if you know we both enter into an agreement here, because it's a contractual agreement. When you pay, there's an offer and acceptance. That's a business transaction. So you know, if you've signed, you know, where you sign your thing, it could also have a behavioural element in there. I've never seen it, because I've been to massage therapists for many years. But I've actually never, it's interesting you bring that up, because I've never ever seen a behavioural element there to set the boundaries and say, these are the behaviours that are expected, our professionalism, our therapists are professionals, you know, whatever it might be, and signing this is that you are agreeing also to, you know, this, to come into this sort of contractual arrangement. Because there's people out there that will take advantage in any situation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
I'll
the other thing you can use is the rolling pin. Have you got one on your shelf there? You can probably edit this bit out.
I've got a broom handle over there.
That sounds like I was actually thinking more a softball bat or a mallet would probably be something I'd use. Forget the silver spoon, or you know how they said the silver spoon. They used to talk about that years ago.
Yeah.
It doesn't work.
What would you consider to be your greatest achievement, either professionally or personally, so far?
Oh, yes. Well, I did look at that question, and I thought, oh yeah, I'll answer it with all those normal questions, like, you know, having your children, doing your studies, But then I thought, you know, it's actually not. One of the biggest thing that I've had to struggle with for many, many years is actually my fear of public speaking. And when I was first, and my anxiety around that probably, when I was at university, I was doing visual arts at the time, and I was in my second year, and I had to get up and speak in front of 10 of my colleagues. And I was so sick, I was vomiting all the time, and I just could not bring myself to do it. So I actually left the degree. So who knows, I could have been a famous artist had I done that. Anyway, that's in the past, can't feel regret about that. So what I did was it took me about 25 years to get through all that, I think, altogether. But I put myself into a situation, and I guess I started to practice teaching people, and it was only because I was a nurse and I was on my own at the time with my son, and I wanted a job without shift work, because shift work is shocking, and trying to get babysitters and all that back in the day, and living a long way away from your work. And then I got a job, but I didn't know that the job entailed me standing up in front of 20 people and teaching them. And I was horrified. I was just mortified. My lips were sticking together like this, and my mouth was dry. I was shaking like this, and it took me a long time. And then I got a job teaching at uni. So I don't know if I was a masochist, actually. Perhaps that was the thing I was doing. God, but getting very, very overwhelmed and anxious when I had to present. But now I love it, and I mean, I like to be with groups, and it's infectious. When you're with a group, you get a lot of energy from them, and so that's my biggest achievement, I suppose. Since 1986.
It's interesting you mentioned public speaking. When I'm running my workshops, the day and the night before, as I'm getting everything, making sure everything's all the paperwork is there, everything's sorted out. And I'm sort of fuss-farting around, and my partner often says, "Why are you worried?" I said, "Because I don't know these people. I've got no idea of their level of training. I don't know whether I'm talking to people who have been in practice for 2 years, or people who have been in practice for 20 years. And every now and again, you get a physiotherapist in there, you get acupuncturists. I've had an osteopath turn up at one of my workshops. It's like, well, what are you doing here? I'm not going to teach you anything you don't know." And at the end, they go, "Well, actually, I learned a lot, because we don't cover that stuff." And then once I get there and start, I'm fine. But I think for me, if I didn't have that level of anxiousness, that I'd go in too cocky and fall flat on my face. That's my concern. So I hear what you're saying. I can relate to it.
Yeah, and I think most people are like that, Laurie. That performance anxiety, if you like, and the "I'm not good enough" story in your head. That, oh my God, I might not be able to answer a question. What if I don't like it? Or what if there's someone there that knows a lot more than I do? Oh my goodness, all that. So the little monkey mind is going, and it's normal. But being able to manage that is it's a hard thing sometimes too, because it takes time, doesn't it? And it doesn't matter as many times as you might present. There's always that anxiety, and have I got everything ready? What if the equipment falls over? What if they don't like it? Or all those sorts of things, and that's normal. But like you say, once you start, you're away.
Yeah. So I know with the COVID-19 crisis that all of your workshops and that have been shut down. So how are you coping with not working?
Oh well, I'm never not working. I'm always doing something. So for me, it's not really been a big change, because I've worked on my own from home for many years, as well as doing my university stuff. But a lot of that has been online as well. So it hasn't been a big change for me, but probably what I have been, I guess my disappointment was the fact that I had about 12 courses organised, ready to go, and we've had to postpone or cancel some of those. But having the online component now coming online with the webinar is great, because then we can offer clients, and it also expands your client base too, because you can offer it to anybody in Australia. So it doesn't matter where you are, you can still do the program and get accredited. And I mean, I think the workshops are great, because you've got people and you've got the energy, and you've got human beings in time, and those sorts of things. And when you've got a group, it's different to having just this dialogue with people on a screen. However, in this situation, and it's great. So other than that, I'm spending a bit of time building gardens and taking my dog for a walk and stuff like that. Sunbaking.
How are your cycling skills going?
Oh, my cycling skills. Well, I've only still taken it out once. I've been walking other than that. I know I said I was going to do it every day, but I'm just like everybody else. I say things and I don't do it. I'm one of the worst, but I will get back on it. Yeah, back on the bike, so to speak. Yeah.
All right, Caddie. Well, we'll call that a day. I will put the links in the notes below for people to find your website and mental health first aid training, and all the online stuff will be posted up on there.
Yeah, that'd be great. And it launches in May, mid-May. So we all the instructors are going to do upskilling in the next couple of weeks, and then by that time, essentially it's the same program, but it's presented online. So once that's done, then we can start registering people. So they can register now with me if they wanted to call me or go onto the website and send an email, or I can give them a call or whatever. Yeah, or if they want to know a bit more about the program, but they're certainly welcome. I hate that word, jump online. Just if you have access to technology, you can go to the website. If not, please ring me. I love human-to-human contact, and I can fill you in there and then, and hopefully give you some inspiration to come along as well.
Caddie, so what is your website?
The website is mentalhealthfirstaidprograms.com. So it's easy to remember, mentalhealthfirstaidprograms.com. Or they can put my name, Caddie Marshall, Mental Health First Aid, and it should come up, or my instructor profile on the Mental Health First Aid website will come up.
Yeah, in the notes below. Caddie.
Okay, that'd be great.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Lovely to talk to you finally. After all these conversations we've had, it's never the same, is it? See, technology is great, but it's so different, isn't it, face to face?
Well, Caddie, thank you very much. Very enlightening conversation, and I know for one I'll be signing up for one of your programs. And if anybody else is interested in contacting Caddie, her details are just listed below. So feel free to contact her. The online course will be up and running by the middle of May. I know it'll be an awesome addition to my toolbox, and I hope you feel as though it could be something you might benefit from as well. So, as we say, guys, stay safe, and we'll see you on the other side of COVID-19. Cheers.